Hello, everybody. It is exactly 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, but we'll just give everybody a couple more minutes to make their way. And so just settle in and we'll get started here shortly. Welcome, everybody. So glad you're here. We will get started shortly. Thank you for being here. All right, we'll give just another minute here. Welcome, everybody. Glad you're here. Hello, good morning. Welcome, everybody. We'll get started shortly. Give everybody just another minute to make their way. All right. It is 10:02, so we will get started. I just want to welcome you to the Sumud Series Update from the Ground and Advocacy Efforts. This webinar will be recorded and available come Tuesday on our webpage. That's elca.org/Sumud, SUMUD. And it will also be available on our social media platforms, our Facebook and our Instagram, which is ELCA Sumud. And so I invite you to like, comment, join the conversation, follow. We'd love to see you on social media as well. I am your host today. My name is Jenny Sung. I am a pastor with the ELCA, and I am the launch coordinator for Sumud for Justice in Palestine and Israel. I'm on a 10-month contract with the ELCA churchwide, and in that 10 months, I'll be creating a strategic communication plan and timeline with all of our networks and creating new networks within the Sumud family, planning and coordinating Sumud launch events like the one we have today, working with the ELCA strategic communications team to create branding and an online presence, as you've seen with our Instagram and Facebook, and then at an interim capacity, advising and preparing ELCA related groups for Holy Land trips with the focus of Sumud. To this, I bring my experience as the global and local missions pastor at St. Andrew's Lutheran Church, which was the 4th largest Lutheran church in America, my background in leading and organizing tours to the Holy Land, and most of all, my passion and hope for Palestine and Israel. Next, I just want to introduce you to our agenda for today. This is the first in a 3-part series. And so the other 2 webinars will happen Saturday, March 6th at 10 a.m. Central, and then Saturday, April 13th at 10 a.m. Central. So you'll see registration links for those coming out shortly, but just have those reserved on your calendar. And our agenda for today will begin with opening in prayer. And then we will have updates from the ground brought to you by Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac. We'll have ELCA updates brought to you by Reverend Gabi and Rev, Reverend Dr. Meghan Aelabouni, Reverend Amy Ruman, and myself. And then we'll have time for discussion questions. And so please, we encourage you to put your questions in the question and answer section of the chat, and we will get to those during the discussion questions. We'll also have a short time for collaboration and input. So what do we do next? And then we'll close in prayer. So thank you for being here. Let us begin with the word of prayer. Please pray with me. Thank you, Holy God, for this time to come together. Open us up to receive your goodness and your word. May we not fall into patterns of pity or apathy, but rather deliver us to empathy and move us into action. May your peace and justice that surpasses all understanding be our constant companion and transform us by the renewing of our minds so that we would try anew to bring justice and Sumud to Palestine, Israel, and our own country. In your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen. Now, it is my great joy and honor to introduce you to Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac, who is the pastor at Christmas Lutheran Church in Bethlehem and the Lutheran Church in Bet Sahur. Many of you may have seen the images of the manger scene with the Christ child in the rubble this past Christmas, and that was Christmas Lutheran Church in Bethlehem. Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac is also a renowned author. I encourage you to read his latest book, The Other Side of the Wall. Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac is a sought-after international speaker on issues related to justice in Palestine and Israel, and he was on the Peace Not Walls review team that led to the creation of Sumud. So it is with great joy and honor that I introduce you to Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac, who will give us updates from the ground.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you. And I guess it's good afternoon or good evening, friends, or good morning. It's good to be here and to continue this process with our partners at the ELCA. To use my time and to delve quickly into the topic. Right now, we are in a state of shock and sadness, maybe even anger and rage. We never thought that this war would continue until today. Never in my wildest dreams and nightmares did I think that we will be entering Lent season and possibly Easter with this genocide happening next door in Gaza. It's deflating, it's demoralizing to continue to see these images every day, every hour from Gaza. The numbers by itself are horrifying. Close to 30,000, not counting those under the rubble, 30,000 killed, including 13,000 children. Real hunger and famine. Our friends in Gaza are telling us really, we thought it can't get worse, but it actually does get worse. And with that said, here in the West Bank, we are monitoring with a strong sense of anxiety and fear. To begin with, there is the threat that Israel will enter Rafah, which could lead to even more catastrophe. Hard to believe that it could get even worse. To the West Bank, could it escalate? And the situation in the West Bank keeps getting worse every day. And it seems that by every Palestinian action, there was an attack at a settlement near Bethlehem recently, 3 days ago, and Israel responded by more collective punishments on Palestinians and closure of roads. Right now, the system of apartheid is a reality. Palestinians can drive or center roads at certain times of the day only. Checkpoints are closed now more than they are in the past. They're not open all the time. You can't just assume that you can go to Ramallah. A trip from Bethlehem to Ramallah is a risk now. And then we're fearful that the war could escalate in Lebanon. So we're living in this sense of anticipation, anxiety, and fear, and rage about what's happening in Gaza, feeling powerless. These are some of the worst times I've lived in all my life. And the fact that this war has lasted so long, to me, signals the collapse of the Western moral system, the human rights matrix, international law, um, the hypocrisy of the Western world is appalling. Even with the deliberation of the International Court of Justice and the clear message and rebuke that about the commitment of genocide, nothing happened. But allegations from Israel alone that some UNRWA members took part in the October 7th lead to cutting funds on UNRWA, the main source of humanitarian support to Palestinians. This level of hypocrisy and racism to me is appalling. I can't understand it. Or maybe we shouldn't, Yet at the same time, there's a growing gap around the world when it comes to public opinion. I came back from London and I did some lobbying for a ceasefire, spoke in churches and also in the parliament, and also spoke in the protest in the street with more than 200,000, if not 250,000 people taking part in it. So you see that gap growing between people and the leadership, whether in politics or in the church. And honestly, I don't know what to do with this. The fact that we have so much support and momentum around the world, yet it is resulting in zero results on the ground. It's really, really demoralizing. Yet, as I said, here in Bethlehem, going back, the situation is very severe. In addition to everything that's happening, let's remember that Bethlehem depends entirely on tourism and on Jerusalem, and we're cut from both. So in terms of families needing assistance and people losing their jobs and people leaving the country, we're back to the second Intifada days. We're witnessing another mass immigration. We're witnessing more and more despair, sadly, and because the need is so real. And I don't know, again, what to make of it. Because those who know me know that I'm a hopeful person, but looking at the reality now, I'm trying to be only realistic. And as Palestinian Christians, we're trying to be resilient. I look at the pictures behind me, the picture which is of Ruth's story in the Bible, a famine. Is this our destiny in this land? Yet we survived and we are resilient. It's only fitting to rebrand this program as Sumud. And one of the things I've learned to see in the recent days is the meaning of Sumud, not just when things get bad as they are right now, but also when the church abandons you, to be honest. And we have had so many difficult conversations in the last few months with our partners around the world because we are troubled and really troubled by the position of many Christians. We're troubled by the silence of many, and not just the Christian Zionists who are supporting this, but the silence and the language of many churches that emphasize Israel's right to defend itself and not recognize that what Israel is engaged in is a vengeance campaign, an ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. And they're very open that they don't want those Gazans to come back to their homes. They're very open that they want to empty Gaza. Will the world hold Israel accountable? This is the number one question right now in our mind. Will the world for once hold Israel accountable and implement the law and make things happen? We're about to enter land. we are in the midst of Lent, and we're about to begin preparing for the Holy Week, a time in which we focus on the suffering of Christ. And sadly, this time, the suffering of Christ has become our suffering. And can we endure? This is a very difficult question right now. Will we recover? In Christmas, I said the words that went around the world that we will recover. I still believe this. And I have many reasons. To begin with, my faith. We've seen difficult times, but God has sustained us. To begin with, I can't accept that darkness will prevail. But at the same time, I know that it's not going to be easy. And I know that our Good Friday will last so long this time. We need the support of our friends, spiritually, morally, before financially. Especially when it seems that Israel has managed to convince the world to normalize a genocide. And this is, I will end with this. Sadly, a genocide has been normalized. Can we find the support we need from our partners to support us and sustain us and tell us that no, they will not accept the normalization of a genocide. They will say, no, we stand with you in our full rejection of what's happening and the narrative that led to it, a narrative that sadly many churches adopted. This is my update. And usually people like to listen to me to uplift them. I'm just being real. And we're walking in the shadow of the valley of death. And our prayer is that we experience Jesus walking next to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Munther, for your powerful testimony and for being real. That's what we need right now. And we know that Reverend Dr. Munther has to go to another meeting, and we just thank you for being here and sharing your word with us. Next, I want to introduce to you Reverend Gabi Aelabouni. He is a Palestinian Christian. He serves as the area desk director of the Middle East and North Africa for ELCA Service and Justice. And he's also an ELCA missionary with his family based in Jerusalem. Reverend Gabi Aelabouni will give us an update from the ELCA.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Pastor Munther, for your words today. I wanted also to take this opportunity to publicly thank you for your incredible witness for the Palestinian people, not only politically, but also how you are standing up to tell the world that what is happening here, especially in Gaza and in the West Bank, is a moral disaster and an ethical disaster and a theological disaster. You don't have to be a Christian to understand this or to work for justice and human rights for Palestinians. But we who are Christians cannot claim to be a Christian and then support the mass killing and displacement of civilians and total destruction of infrastructure supporting life. Pastor Munther, on behalf of the ELCA, we are grateful to you for your moral clarity and for reminding us of this. And I wanted to share with all of you in this webinar that although things have been incredibly difficult, as you have heard from Pastor Munther this today or this evening, you need to know that the Palestinian Church has not given up and has not backed down from responding, despite the hard reality. This, to me, is truly what Sumud means and why it matters, because it is easy to be steadfast when things are easy. But when we are living through hell on earth and you keep going, that is true steadfastness and resilience. So the Palestinian Christian community, like our partners in the ELCJHL, are still showing up. They are showing up to keep the schools open, to welcome all the students, even when their parents cannot pay because they have lost all their income, keeping all of the teachers and staff employed, even when the church does not have the funds to do so, and starting new initiatives since October to bring psychosocial support to young people who are living through incredible trauma and anxiety. The church is working through the Diaconal Center to help people to get food and pay rent and buy medicine. The Augusta Victoria Hospital is supporting patients and families from Gaza who got stuck in Jerusalem after October 7th and have no home to go to. The Gender Justice Ministry is hosting the World Day of Prayer next week because Palestine is the host country for 2024, bringing together Christian women from all the churches around the world to pray and tell the stories of Palestinian women. Pastors like Pastor Munther are continuing to care for their congregations and to proclaim the gospel and to offer spiritual support. But as you heard Pastor Munther say, people are tired. Pastors are exhausted. People are exhausted and traumatized, and they need our support. And so the ELCA is responding in accompaniment, in awareness raising, and in advocacy. In a moment, Pastor Meghan and Pastor Jenny will share more about our awareness raising through Sumud. And Pastor Amy and our colleague Susannah will talk with us about our ELCA advocacy efforts. But I also wanted to share with you some of our accompaniment during this time. Part of that is our in-person presence as our family has remained in Palestine as missionaries to continue to accompany the ELCJHL and our siblings in Palestine. You may also know that we did evacuate our Yagam volunteers and coordinators, and the Yagam program and the Yagam program, and that all was made in consultation with Bishop Azar, and that was a difficult decision to wait until 2025 to restart the JWB program. But the Yagam program has also committed to this restart, and in the meantime, we will work on reviewing and rebuilding that JWB program. We also have plans for in-person accompaniment and solidarity visits from the ELCA. Some are still in the early planning stages, and so I cannot share about them yet. But we do have a trip for bishops and church-wide leaders planned for this June, and a trip through young adult ministries for young adults of color is being planned for 2025. And equally important, we are accompanying the Palestinian people through financial support for ministries and projects. Since October 7th, the ELCA has sent additional grants and gifts above and beyond our planned support, totaling more than $900,000. This includes funds from the Lutheran Disaster Response Appeal. Some of this will go to Gaza, some to Augusta Victoria Hospital, and some is going through our partners in the West Bank for projects such as psychological and psychosocial support for children, diaconal ministry grants to community members for food, medicine, and housing, emergency aid for the schools, and affordable housing for Palestinians in Jerusalem. This work, again, happened through your generosity. It's happening through World Hunger. It's happening through Lutheran Disaster Response, and through the generosity of many individuals in the ELCA. Looking forward, we are also working with Dar al-Kalima University, who is developing a project to provide art therapy and other psychosocial support to children and families in Gaza and the West Bank. The Dar al-Kalam University already are on the ground. They already have counselors and therapists working in Gaza, and we will be partnering with Dar al-Kalam in this project. We are also in the early stages of talking with partner organizations in Bethlehem about potential support for vocational programs that would help small businesses to hire and pay employees so that more people are employed and the businesses also can get on their feet. So this is kind of an overview about what has been done and where we are heading from here. I'm happy to share more details and answer any questions later in our discussion time. But please know that we are continuing to serve on your behalf and in close collaboration with our Palestinian partners during this time to offer all of the support we can as the ELCA. Dear siblings in Christ, thank you for this time. Now I would like to introduce my colleague, Pastor Amy Rubin, Senior Director for ELCA Witness in Society, who will share a brief update from our ELCA advocacy team. Amy?
Thank you, Gabi. Dear friends, as you know, our ELCA accompaniment with the ELCA JHL and in the region includes advocacy, which is central and essential and continues to be urgent at this time. This happens both through the work of the Sumud network, through action alerts and mobilization, but also by ensuring that we have a skilled and effective presence on Capitol Hill to work in coalitions, to represent the policy positions of the ELCA and accompaniment our siblings in Palestine and the region through that witness. The position that we are hiring is still open. We want to find the right person who can bring strengths and skills, including lived experience in the region, experience on Capitol Hill and in public policy, experience in mobilization and grassroots networking and communications. So I'm sharing the job description in the chat in a minute, as well as the contact information for Silas Kulkarni, who is the hiring manager. We really believe the right person is out there, and we will find that person through networking, through questions. So if you think you might be someone for it, or might know someone who is a good match, but aren't sure, please reach out to Silas. We'll welcome any and all suggestions about filling this position. We are so pleased right now it is being ably and effectively and passionately led by Susannah Cunningham, from whom we will hear in a minute. So thank you, Gabi, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Pastor Amy, for the update. And now I would like to introduce Pastor Meghan Aelabouni, the theologian in residence in the MENA region. Pastor Aelabouni.
Hello, all. It is really wonderful to be with you. And I want to share my thanks also as a member of the Sumud core team for all of my colleagues here and for all of you who have joined this webinar or will watch the recording and take the time out from your day and from your life to learn, to stand with us, and to prepare for action, especially in today's webinar around the issue of advocacy. I would like to, as a member of the Sumud core team, offer just a couple of thoughts and updates on where we are in the process of birthing and launching Sumud. As some of you may know, Sumud is an initiative of the ELCA that follows more than 18 months of in-depth study and review from a joint ELCA and ELCJHL team. And we did not know when we began the process of introducing Sumud and planned for its launch that the war on Gaza and the West Bank would erupt when it did. Our first webinar, some of you know, was October 14th. And so what we have found alongside many of you is that we are living in a time of incredible urgency, a time when many of us are looking for strong action, for some way to come together and to end the humanitarian and the moral disaster here, and to find ways forward, not just in the short term, but also in the long term. And at the same time, part of what the Sumud launch is about the deep visioning work, the discernment of asking, who are we as the ELCA, and how is God calling us as a church? How are we gifted and positioned to be able to join in this justice work? One analogy that some of us have been thinking about recently is the ways in which our ministry, Lutheran Disaster Response, for example, in its own identity discernment, has found that it is in many ways best positioned, as some of you know, to do long-term recovery work that is based in long-term relationships and communities, so that long after first responders move out and the media leaves and the cameras turn off, we are still on the ground. And I think in some ways, Sumud is analogous to that, because while we are balancing the both and of trying to respond to urgent, current, critical needs in advocacy, accompaniment, and awareness raising, we also know that we are called to continue work that is also rooted in deep and long-term relationships here in the context with our Palestinian partners, through the Palestinian Church and faith-based organizations, with ecumenical and interfaith and global partners. And so we cannot give up or turn away from this long, deep, in some cases slow work of helping more people in the ELCA and in the US to learn, to better understand what is happening here, and the moral, ethical, theological dimensions of the justice work we do, so that more of our community can be mobilized and informed to join in the active work of working for justice, always grounded in our accompaniment relationships and led by the perspectives of the communities and people who are most affected by the occupation and now by the war, who are our Palestinian partners. And so I wanted to offer a few thoughts to frame for all of us how Sumud has been approaching this both and in a time where we are also rebuilding, starting to build on the networks we have, creating communications channels and an online presence and resources, all of which my colleague Pastor Jenny will share more with us in a moment. The last thing I'd like to share is that we are looking then both at the now and at the long term. And part of that includes bringing on board our permanent full-time program director for Sumud. Like the Middle East policy position in Witness and Society, this is a new position. The Sumud director position has a job description that has been approved by the executive team of ELCA Service and Justice. It is currently under review by the administration team of the ELCA, and we hope soon will be posted on the ELCA job board, and will be also then a position that we encourage you to share as we search for the candidate with the gifts, the skills, and the experience to be able to lead Sumud in its long-term goals. With that, I want to turn to my colleague, Pastor Jenny Sung, our launch coordinator, for more updates.
Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Meghan. So what have we done with Sumud already? We've laid a lot of the groundwork to be able to catapult into this next season of Sumud. So we started in November and we began the branding process. And I will invite you all this Sunday, as in tomorrow, we're going to launch 3 logo options and we would love your input. And so look for them on social media, Instagram and Facebook. We would love to have your vote as to which logo you would love to see the most for Sumud, and that will be on our Instagram and Facebook. We have also worked thoughtfully and intentionally when putting together our Lenten series that you may have seen. We brought on a Palestinian Christian film company and made sure to lift up Palestinian Christian voices. I encourage you to find the videos, they're available on our webpage along with our social media platforms. We have already had 440 people register for the series, and that includes pastors, bishops, that includes leaders of churches. And so we're quite pleased with the amount of response that we're getting. We have had 53 people register for small groups with us, Sumud, and also with the ELCA Young Adults. We have had over 1,800 views for our English week 1 video, and we've also had over 4,000 views of the promo video. So continue sharing, continue to get the word out. What we've realized is a lot of it is people needing to get information, and so share the information. We know that this information of what is happening is nuanced and it's layered, but it's not so complicated that we can't understand it. And so I encourage you to continue to share, continue to ask questions, continue to participate in the conversation. We have also began compiling many lists of contacts and began figuring out how to organize them in a CRM so that we can also tag each contact and begin regular contact with our networks. And lastly, we do have a newly elected bishop trip planned for June 2024. And so this goes into some of the goals that we had with Sumud. You will also see Sumud at the 2024 Youth Gathering and Young Adult Gathering, along with Synod Assemblies. If you are interested in having Sumud represented at your Synod Assembly or congregation, please feel free to reach out to me. I will put my email in the chat, and feel free to reach out about any time you would like us to come and share, whether it's on Zoom or in person, to share more about what is happening with Sumud and our Palestinian siblings. Now, I would like to introduce you to Susannah Cunningham, who will be sharing our next portion of this webinar. She is a senior policy advisor for the ELCA and currently serving on an interim basis for Middle East and North Africa policy. Susannah brings with her considerable Washington public policy experience, including most recently as the head of Congregational Affairs for Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services. She has previously served in Washington foreign policy organizations like Project on Middle East Democracy and the Enough Project at the Center for American Progress. In 2008, Susannah co-founded the Refugee Legal Aid Project at St. Andrew's Refugee Service in Cairo, Egypt, a mission of the ELCA which serves Egypt's sizable urban refugee population. Susannah is a Truman National Security Fellow, a regular advisor for Foreign Policy for America, and a co-chair of the Legislative Committee of Evacuate Our Allies Coalition. It is with great joy that I introduce to you now for our focus topic, What Can We Do? Susannah Cunningham.
Hello, thank you, Jenny. I understand it's a little bit of a, bios are always funny to hear, particularly about yourself, but thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. It is with great gratitude that I get to serve along my colleagues at the ELCA. Today, I'm going to go over a little bit about what has been happening on the policy side. So first, and work with me here, we'll go through congressional action, administrative action, meaning everything to do with the Biden administration. We'll go through some of the work on courts, and then we'll talk a little bit about how the contours are taking shape today. So the ELCA continues to urge Congress and the administration to publicly call for a ceasefire to prevent further loss of life in Gaza, to prioritize the protection of civilians, including by urgently securing the entrance of humanitarian aid into Gaza and working to secure the release of hostages, and to urge all parties to fully respect international law. Part of the additional parts of this agenda include continuing UNRWA funding for humanitarian assistance for Palestinians, the call for U.S. support for self-representation for Palestinians, and a fruitful beginning for U.S. recognition of Palestinian statehood, congressional oversight, U.S. congressional oversight over U.S. military aid to Israel and foreign nations, and congressional appropriations to support efforts that we care deeply about at the Augusta Victoria Hospital. Nearly 30,000 Palestinian people have been killed in Gaza since the start of this war, following the death of 1,200 Israelis on October 7th. Of these 30,000 Palestinians, it's said that 70% are women and children, and that 1.9 million Palestinians have been displaced from their homes, meaning over 85% of Gaza's population. As of late January, when the last edition was made, 69 US legislators have voiced their call for a ceasefire, and most of those members are in the House of Representatives. We know that there has been mobilization to try to seek justice and compassion and care and the protection of human life. Some of the leadership that has happened included in January when the Senate, when Senator Bernie Sanders pursued a resolution, the 502B resolution, to provide congressional oversight under US military arms to Israel and the Israel-Hamas war. In January, the Senate tabled Bernie Sanders' effort to curb military aid to Israel during Israel's Hamas's war, but, quote, the roll call vote begins to reveal the depth of unease among US lawmakers over Israel's prosecution of the war against Hamas, end quote. In all, 11 senators, Democratic senators, joined Senator Sanders in the procedural vote. They represented across the spectrum within the Democratic Party, from progressives to moderates, while, unfortunately, 72 senators opposed. A number of senators were, in that case, were unable to travel because of inclement weather. We understand another senator from Hawaii would have also voted in favor of Senator Sanders' resolution. The future of that resolution is unclear, but Senator Sanders has vowed to continue to advocate for congressional oversight into arms sales to Israel. Following this failed procedural vote, though, Senator Van Hollen from Maryland pursued an amendment that would require that, quote, weapons received by any country under the request used in accordance with US law, international human law, and the law of armed conflict, meaning that they must abide by those three. The measure sought to require that the president would report to Congress on the matter, and according to statements by the senator's own office, to strengthen, quote, current law that prohibits US security assistance to any country that prevents or restricts US humanitarian assistance to those in need, end quote. As a result of that action, despite the fact that I believe there were over a dozen senators who supported that, all in the Democratic Party, who supported that resolution, they were able to get from the Biden administration on February 8th. President Biden issued a new national security memorandum that lays out the standards by which countries that receive US weapons must adhere to, and for the first time ever, require the administration to submit an annual report to Congress about whether those countries are meeting the requirements. That timeline, we don't have to wait a year. The clock started as of February 8th for 45 days before submissions delineating violations of international human rights law could be submitted to the State Department as part of a compilation of reports to eventually being given in May of this year, on May 11th, to Congress. It requires, the memorandum requires that a report to Congress be provided by May 11th, delineating if US arms were used to violate international human rights, as well as a separate standard to delineate when best practices to protect civilian lives were not pursued. So the bar is not alone whether or not there's evidence of human rights abuses, international violations of international law. Human rights law. And to be clear, we have met with Senator Van Hollen, the ELCA, along with our ecumenical partners, have met with the ELCA. We have met with Senator Van Hollen, spoke with him at length, and we are using our relationship to try to facilitate regular human rights organizations, Palestinian and regional human rights organizations, to submit evidence and documentation of reports of violations of international law. So this may be part of that report that goes to Congress. So in the meantime, as I mentioned, that I would share with you a little bit that's going on around the courts as well. The South African government appealed to the International Court of Justice to consider whether the Israeli military action in Gaza, resulting in the deaths of tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians, has reached the definition of genocide. That case will likely run for years. So that's simply the reality of the ICJ. But the ICJ's immediate findings, interim findings, were that, quote, they found that they, quote, found it plausible that Israel's acts could amount to genocide, end quote, and they issued 6 provisional measures, ordering Israel to take all measures with its power to prevent genocidal acts, including preventing and punishing incitement to genocide and ensuring aid and services reach Palestinians under siege in Gaza, and that they preserve evidence of crimes committed in Gaza. Shortly after this decision from the ICJ, in terms of timing and sequence, Israel made public separate allegations that staff of UNRWA, the humanitarian organization serving millions of Palestinians in Gaza, the West Bank, Jordan, and Lebanon, among others, were complicit in the October 7th attack. UNRWA stated that such allegations were horrifying and moved quickly to fire these staff and launched an independent investigation into the allegations. Unfortunately, to date, information on the allegations have provided to UNRWA have been limited and encumbered the ability for UNRWA to verify such allegations. UNRWA provides humanitarian assistance, health, and educational services for some 3 million of the 5.9 million Palestinian refugees in Gaza, East Jerusalem, the West Bank, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. Augusta Victoria Hospital, operated by Lutheran World Federation in East Jerusalem, is the first and only hospital serving all Palestinians, including refugees, in the West Bank and Gaza. Established in 1950, it continues to provide comprehensive cancer care, including radiation therapy and palliative care in the Palestinian territories, and is the only medical facility in the West Bank offering pediatric kidney dialysis. Around 30% of its patients come from Gaza, who are at present not able to access the services of Augusta Victoria Hospital. I share this because what followed in the wake of such allegations against UNRWA, specifically UNRWA staff, and that resulted in an independent investigation, has been a move to defund UNRWA. In the middle of an historic siege on Gaza, defunding UNRWA is a devastating act, leaving millions of Gazans without access to humanitarian care. We hope that such efforts to defund UNRWA are reversed. And I say this because the Senate passed a package in the last 2 weeks that included language to ban U.S. funding of UNRWA. We hope that future fiscal packages, spending packages, reverse this decision. Where we are right now, in the meantime, we're still at 69 legislators who have called for a ceasefire. Most in the House, as I mentioned, in the House of Representatives, but some 25 senators, only Democrats, led by Senator Ossoff from Georgia, recently called for a conditional ceasefire. We hope these senators find their way to call for an unconditional bilateral ceasefire by all parties and the protection of civilian life. I've shared here the crisis group, International Crisis Group, a notable organization studying conflict and atrocities and genocide around the globe. They originally were founded in the wake of the Rwandan genocide, has shared a little bit about why donors should not suspend aid to UNRWA in this moment. So if you're curious, there's more details available at that link. I want to say, though, while all of this is happening, while there can be so much it seems like there's lack of action, and that unfortunately that our politicians aren't doing nearly enough or being guided by a deep compassion for the protection and care of human life and civilian life. But that being said, it is not quiet. There is not inaction. There is incredible mobilization around the country. I want to share a few resources, actually it's more than a few resources, about activation of communities who previously you might not have thought of as being engaged on this issue. I'm sharing a few articles sharing communities of different varieties who have taken public action calling for the protection of civilians. We know that Michigan Arab and Muslims have pushed to call on Biden to be stronger in the support of Palestinian people and for the protection of civilian life. We know that Black pastors have pressured Biden, who have a close and intimate relationship with the president, to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. We know that the majority of Asian Americans think that the U.S. has not done enough to protect Palestinians. And to further this, in most recent news, the AME, notable Black church leaders from the AME have called for the end of U.S. military aid to Israel. This kind of mobilization is historic, and it should be, because this is a historic moment for the Palestinian people in a way that I hope that people are able to see the preciousness of human life of all parties in this, but that action by Americans in a representative government is deeply needed. And I am moved, as I think most of us are, when people see a common bound in our shared humanity. And so I want to share that there is reason to hope, even in the darkness, as the MLK quotes, in the darkness, you can see the stars. And we have plenty of them. And I'm sharing another. There are public unions calling for a ceasefire. Some of the largest unions in the entire country have called for a ceasefire. The SEIU, United Auto Workers, the American Federation of Teachers. We are in good company. And so I want to go next to what we have before us. I have had the privilege of working for human rights organizations that come from a secular background. I have had the joy and gratitude of getting to work for those who come from a faith-based background. And I could tell you that they are not the same experience. When I go into congressional meetings, of which I have to go into hundreds each year, my experience as a person of faith, as a representative of a faith-based organization, is profoundly different. I get to start the conversation to say, you know, we come from a faith-based background. We see the face of God in every person. And that is where we begin. And I don't have a transactional conversation. I have a transformational conversation, even when I know that everything about this person's voting history, legislative background, public statements mean they're not going to agree with me in this meeting. I can still have a transformational conversation about where we can meet. And if I can do it, you can do it. This is the opportunity. I think the best way to handle grief and despair is to let it drive you to action. As someone once said, being brave is not the absence of fear. In fact, it is required. So every time we are in a situation where we feel afraid, we have the option to act and do something. And so, because I'm all about resources here, I want to share a list of resources that are available. First, some of these are that I've just shared in the chat, and they're multiple. They're multifold, but they're meant to allow different opportunities. I see that also some links don't work here. So I'll share a link at the end of this chat, or after I'm done, I'll share a link where you can access the hyperlinks associated with each of these. But it shows the different ways that we can engage. First, that we can send a message to policymakers. The ELCA has advocacy action alerts that you can customize your message to your own legislators and tell them that you want all people protected, that you want a safe Holy Land for Israelis, for Palestinians, and that dream that the American polity, that Congress and the administration can be part of that. As close allies and some of the closest diplomatic allies to the Israel government, they can do something. And as their representatives to you, you can ask them to do that. So send a message to your policymakers. Separate, write a letter to the editor. We have an entire guide and template about how you can write a letter to the editor to your local paper and say, I think more should be done. I think we shouldn't have to watch this unfold. You can also meet with your representatives and senators, and we just walk you right through with a guide of how to do that, how to schedule a meeting in district. They go on district. Their job is to listen to you. They want you to like them because liking them is mandatory for them keeping their job. And engage with your legislators online through social media. We have a whole other guide for this. And then I think this has been shared, and thank you, Amy, for sharing the most recent action alert that's provided. But that there are ways when you feel like you've done all of this and something happens in the news and you just feel like, I want to help directly. I'll share part of this link is also to support Lutheran disaster response and the work that they're doing to serve Palestinians in this difficult time. I hope you see this. I hope you see the arc of how things are moving and that they are indeed moving, not fast enough, but they are moving, and that you can be part of it. Thank you for everything you do. It means more than you can possibly know.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Susannah, for your work, for your sharing, for your resources, for your passion. Thank you so much for participating and bringing your wisdom and adding it to this webinar. I see that people are wondering how to be in contact with you, so maybe you can throw your information in the chat as well, and we look forward to more questions. We are now entering the time that is for you to bring your questions, bring your wonderings, bring your comments. And so I invite you now to go ahead and go to the question and answer portion of the Zoom room and add your questions, your thoughts, any discussion that you might have. And as those questions and comments start to roll in, we have some wonderings for you as you are here. What are you working on in your own context where you would like collaboration or would like some more information? Feel free to put that in the chat as well. Along with what would you like us to address in upcoming webinars? Those are also things that we would love to invite you to share in the chat and on the discussion as well.
Jenny, maybe I could just pick up one of the questions here. I think it's a challenging one, but Ann Leip is asking, Susannah, how would you encourage those of us who live in deep red areas to get our legislators on board with a ceasefire and resumption of humanitarian aid? Their support for Israel is deeply rooted and intransigent.
Yes. So one of the things that I have been known for in the last few years is continuing to work on a bill that I've been told many times would not happen, and continue going to offices and try again, and then come in with surrogates who they trusted surrogates who they've worked with before, and that's a full-time job. But there are versions of this, and the first thing you have to think of is these are people, and you want to speak from a place of, this is where I come from, this is my perspective of devotion. What I'm coming to talk to you about is a part of my devotion. It is a part of my devotional practice. That there be safety for all humans, that there be safety and protection and care and compassion in the Holy Land is an act of devotion for me. And I'm telling you, those conversations are very different. It is very, very rare, it's not unheard of, but it is very rare that staff in an office act in an aggressive way in response. And it is extremely rare that a member would. So if you're meeting with a member, the member is going to be they're socially versed in addressing, adversarial or opposing positions, but they are going to be very respectful of devotion. And sometimes if it becomes a question where they want to talk about the wonkus nature of maybe military policy, my work allows me to bring in national security experts. Like I get to work with national security experts who can handle and address those things. But if you're going in as a constituent, you can say, Everything in between military strategy may be something, but the death of tens of thousands of civilians, like nothing is going to argue me into believing that that is a part of how we keep a nation or America's closest allies, because that's their perspective. Their perspective is that America's closest ally must do what they must do, and your response is that is not how a democracy works. That is not how the society that we've decided to live in, and that the greatest generation died by the millions to create post-World War II. We believe in the protection of civilian life. And to me, seeing children, seeing babies, seeing there be no place to turn, you cannot respond to that with military strategy discussions. That's not my job. That's not even your job. Your job is to express and to share that there must be a protection of civilian life. And you can do that speaking from a place of faith. And by the way, it doesn't mean that they'll agree, but I believe in redemption. That's what I say oftentimes when I go into offices that have over and over again, I think, made the wrong policy decision. I say, do you believe in redemption? We're going to go back and give them another chance. And I'm always polite. I'm always kind. That to me is better than gold in terms of the way that you treat people. And they will all, and if you show it, oftentimes, and it's very rare, and it'll only be a staff member where you might ever see them not reciprocate kindness, but they will often and overwhelmingly respect that and in kind and say, we're of a differing opinion. You say, I understand. If you don't mind, I'd like to send you resources as to why I think you should reconsider. And when I get a no, I just walk out and I go, I'll be back because I believe in redemption.
Thanks, Susannah. Okay, we have some questions here. And by the way, we're going to take them until about 10 past the hour when we are scheduled to go on to the next portion. And we will get to those we can, and those we don't reach, we will get back to you after the webinar. We have the next question from Barb Giroud is about how do I get link info? And I think one thing that perhaps Jenny, you put earlier in the chat was elca.org/Sumud. I would also add that you can also get our latest resources concerning the crisis by going to elca.org/crisis-holy-land. Sorry about that. So those are two places to get started. We have a question here, Susannah, about your being at the CMAP conference from Chris Cowan.
Is that in March? Is that
It's in April.
Okay. So we'll see. I hope so. I'm a big fan of CMAP colleagues, so I hope so, but we'll see. If you think I should, please share more information.
Okay, good. Barb has another question. I'm working on a resolution for Synod Assembly. The deadline is next Friday and would love some collaboration. So I think that's a question to those here online. If you are interested in collaborating, perhaps, Barb, you could provide us with your email address so people could have that. We could share it and they could be in touch with you. Okay, how do we reach out to local churches about this work? Is there a toolkit? Jenny?
Yeah, so that is part of the work in which we are working on. We are putting together a toolkit specifically for Synod assemblies where you'll have a whole table set up, but also have the ability through some short training sessions to talk about Sumud, and then of course have print materials as well to go along with that. We do encourage that will be a part of our next webinars, is talking about how we can prepare for Synod assemblies and what kind of materials you would want in that toolkit. So please share what comes to mind, and we love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you. Now let's see. Yeah, Elizabeth is asking a question. She lived on in the West Bank for 2 years and have been doing presentations around Chicago. Would love to would love clear access to what the ELCA is doing so that I can access that easily and share widely. Again, I think probably we want to refer to the websites we just mentioned, and also, also the email addresses. We put Susannah's up there as well for what we're doing on the advocacy side. I think that is what I would say generally, unless Jenny, you want to add something more?
No, I think that just about covers it. I also, unless Reverend Dr. Meghan Aelabouni has anything else to add, or Reverend Gabi Aelabouni.
I would just add to that. It's a great question, Libby, because it's similar to some of the other questions we're seeing come in the Q&A about this overall question of how to get resources out, how to give you all toolkits to bring information to your congregations. And so yes, and there's also a question I can take now about, is the work of Sumud being shared with the Lutheran printed materials? So yes, one of the primary goals and aims of Sumud over the long term is going to be that it is a place for resource creation and sharing, for the creation of educational and theological resources, introductory resources, because we heard that in the review. People need resources that you can take to someone who said, I didn't know anything about this, and then all of a sudden it's all over the news. Where are we as the ELCA, or where are we as Christians, or what does this mean? So this is a big part of what Sumud will be doing long term. And yes, there are plans in place to collaborate with Living Lutheran, which has now, as some of you know, moved entirely online, which provides the opportunity for updated and current content to be more easily shared. And also to in an ongoing way to create resources. So the Lenten video resource created by Sumud was a first resource that introduces Palestinian Christians and the idea of Sumud as a theology that is based in the way of Jesus and justice. And so, yes, all of these things are absolutely a central part of what Sumud, we believe, is called to do, because as also Carol LaHerd lifted up, there is this gap still between those of us who maybe are part of the ELCA, who know and have spent time, have lived experience and knowledge of what is happening. And then we have an awful lot of folks in our church and in the US who don't know, who are uninformed or misinformed, as Carol LaHerd said. And so in partnership with our Palestinian partners, our calling is to do the work of helping this awareness to grow within the ELCA. I mean, it's very similar in a way to anti-racist work, in that our Palestinian partners have so much wisdom and perspective to share, but it is also our job, especially as Americans whose country and government and money are so involved here, to do our own work of educating ourselves and one another about the just issues at play and how God is calling us to work for justice. So I want to thank you all for lifting those up and let you know that, yes, this is central to what Sumud's identity is and will be.
Thanks, Megan. So just want to draw your attention, Barb Giroux wanted to get in touch with folks about collaborating on Synod Assembly resolutions. Her email address is there in the chat. Now we have a question from Sarah about concrete examples of problems happening in the West Bank, like the road closures, the inability to get to school or work, and any other concrete stories. And I think, Gabi, that might be yours.
Thanks, Dennis, and thanks, Sarah, for the question. I will give you just a quick example. There is really increased harassment of children from the neighboring towns and refugee camps around Bethlehem. So children right now from these towns and from the refugee camps who are attending, for example, some of the ELCGHL schools, they come late to school in the morning because they are being stopped on the way to school every morning. They are strip searched. They are being humiliated. They are being yelled at by Israeli soldiers. And when they come, they are coming. They are coming to school late, but they are also scared. Their mind is not focused on school or classes. They are thinking about how they can go home safely at the end of the day. So that's why psychosocial support for children is really, really needed. And also these children, when they go home, they are going to either to these towns or to the refugee camps. We are going to an environment where these children are faced by hardship because not only that they are getting strip searched or they are getting yelled at or stopped by the soldiers, that the Israeli soldiers at night, they come to the refugee camps, they knock on doors, they come with guns, they come with jeeps, they come with weapons, and these children are terrified. So this is happening uh, almost daily now in the Bethlehem area, in Nablus, in Jenin, and it is really hard to watch and to hear the stories from these children. I hope this helps.
Thanks, Gabi. Now we have a couple of questions, but I think we are on our schedule to move along. And as I said, we will be getting back to you about any of these things that are in the Q&A that you sent that we didn't get a chance to answer, or which may require a more extensive answer. So back to you, Jenny. And you're on mute.
Oh, it had to happen to one of us. Thank you so much, Dennis. And for all of you that may not know Dennis, Fredo is recently retired from his position as director of the Lutheran Office for World Community representing the ELCA and Lutheran World Federation at UN headquarters in New York. Throughout 2023, he served as a consultant for Middle East public policy for ELCA Witness in Society, a role he has been filling for about 15 years with the core staff group for the former Peace Not Walls. And he's been associated with the implementation of the church-wide strategy for engagement in Israel and Palestine since it began in 2005. He continues to represent the ELCA on the board of Churches for Middle East Peace. And so thank you so much, Dennis, for answering and fielding some of those questions. In fact, we may be able to take a few more questions because we did roll the collaboration and input into this time. So again, just to ask, what are you working on in your own context that you would like collaboration? And what would you like to have addressed in future webinars? And so I invite you to throw those in the question and answer portion of the Zoom room. And Dennis, if it's okay, I'll toss it back to you.
Sure. In that case, maybe I should go to one comment that is offered here from Anna. She says, I'm not sure if this is what you're looking for, but I watched the movie Israelism last night, and I think increased showings could be a mechanism to open eyes about the difference between Judaism and Israel and the harm and reality of apartheid and occupation. And she says there's more information about this at israelismfilm.com. And let's see. Yeah, And there had been a question here about, is Bethlehem open to foreign visitors? And Pastor Munther has said, yes, it is, and they're calling for people for solidarity visits. Also, Meghan says that currently the openness of Bethlehem in terms of checkpoints depends on the day. Not all pilgrimage sites are currently open, and many hotels are closed, but as the airlines resume travel and tourism picks up, they will most likely open. We should know more in the coming weeks. Appreciate the thank yous, and also Claudette reminds us there are many outstanding films that can be accessed through Voices from the Holy Land as well as from other organizations. There was an earlier one about the hearings that are going on at the International Criminal Court, International Court of Justice, pardon me, in The Hague. And just to elaborate on that for the rest of you, these hearings have been on the legal question about the occupation, and it's a separate matter from the South Africa versus Israel case that was also before the court that we heard the preliminary measures ordered back at the end of January. This other one is in relation to a request from the UN General Assembly last year, and the hearing started on Monday. They continue until this Monday. And if you go to the website www.icj-cji.org, you can find these. There are videos of all the sessions so far in the multimedia area, and then there are verbatim records. Maybe I should just put this in the chat to expedite the accessibility for those of you, since I kind of ran through those acronyms or those URLs pretty quickly. Yes, let's see. I think we have one more question or one more comment. Bishop Amy says, for future webinars, I wonder if we might learn more deeply about definitions for apartheid, genocide, and if the ELCA and ELCJHL are using these descriptions. I think Pastor Meghan is in the process of providing an answer, at least in writing, but maybe if you don't mind taking that live, Meghan.
Not at all. This is a great question. Thank you, Bishop Current. One of the things that Sumud will be working on is working in a strategic and kind of structural way within the ELCA to look at our current strategies. So as many of you know, we have a 2005 strategy and some addendums and additions to that strategy that have been adopted by ELCA church-wide assemblies and or by the ELCA Church Council. I mentioned that because the question of terminology, do we say apartheid? Do we say genocide? Do we say settler colonialism? Is tied in part to the language and terminology that has been formally adopted by the ELCA. So on the one hand, part of the answer to that question is that part of what Sumud is going to do as a long-term goal is to organize a review of the 2005 strategy and to look into updates, rewrites, renewing of our strategy, because that becomes the foundational document that guides those of us who work in a church-wide or global capacity, as well as those of us in the ELCA on the ground. Another part to that question, as an update though, is that the World Council of Churches, to which we are in part a member, did have discussion at their last General Assembly last year about this question, and the decision by the WCC General Assembly was a suggestion that member churches of the World Council of Churches study the definitions of these human rights categories in order to determine their applicability. It is a really sensitive question here in the context. Part of it, and Pastor Munther has alluded to this in some of his work, is that free speech is not as accessible to our Palestinian partners in many cases and to the churches who need to work with the local governments. And so when they are asked what language should we use, we have to keep in mind that in many cases, we as a U.S. church have more freedom, more capacity to choose whatever terminology or language we want. That said, there is a need to look at the language we use. The thing about apartheid, and I always remember as I've looked at the definition, is that the reason that international human rights law created a definition for apartheid is because it is not a trademarked thing that only happened in South Africa and only happened during a certain time and cannot be applied anywhere else. The whole reason there is a definition of apartheid and genocide and these international law is in recognition that these conditions can happen in other contexts. So it is really important, I think, for that to become part of the discussion. Some of what we have heard from partners on the ground is use the terminology, don't use the terminology, be clear and bold about the reality. Be specific about the human rights abuses, be clear about what's going on. So those are some of the answers to that question, and we really appreciate the question. And if any of my other colleagues want to join in, I would welcome that too.
Yeah, I would just say that there are UN conventions on both apartheid and genocide. And what we'll do is give you a link to those, which is at least international legal definition that is used in those cases. So we'll be providing that at a later point. We have another question for Gabi about, is school mandatory? This is from Susan. Why else would families send their children on this deplorable journey under terrifying conditions when kids wonder if they'll get back home safely? What can be done in this regard?
Yeah, thanks, Dennis, and thanks, Susan. Very good question. Just a reminder to say that the Palestinian children are children like any children around the world. They deserve to go to school. They deserve to learn. They deserve to be safe. They deserve to live with dreams for the future. And at the same time, this is the reality that they are living in. Unfortunately, you don't know, they don't know, I don't know, we don't know really here on the ground how every day looks for these children. Sometimes there are multiple checkpoints, sometimes there's nothing. Having said that, I know that, and specifically, I'm in very close touch with the principals at the Lutheran schools, and we are in partnership with all of the ELCJL schools here. I know that all the principals and the social workers work daily with these children, and they work with their families, and they also try to support them. So if they come late, they are not giving them a hard time. They are also working with a social worker at school to provide them with extra sessions for support and therapy, etc. They are also giving them extra attention and extra time. So if they missed classes, they can catch up in a good and healthy environment that suits these children. Children, again, wanted to go to school. That's the thing. They wanted to go to school. And I wanted to mention, and that's something that we don't often think about in our settings, that when they go to school, and especially when they go to the ELCJHL schools, they learn about justice. They learn about peace. They learn about hope. They teach them how to have a chance in life in Palestine. So to me, I wanted to make sure that you also understand that it is very important for these children to go to school, despite all the challenges, because the ELCA JHL schools are providing healthy environment in unhealthy place right now. So that's at least what we are seeing on the ground. And the schools not just providing education, it's providing safe haven, it's providing therapy, it's providing support, it's providing even meals if they need them. So I'm grateful that the schools are there and they are able to open their doors for the children to come and to work with them, despite all the challenges that the children are facing. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Gabi. Yeah, so we appreciate the thanks that people are providing us. And maybe one more thing, Jenny, unless you want to wrap up at the moment. I have one other question here, maybe.
Go for it.
So where can we begin? This is from Tammy. Where can we begin with education for our local pastors to get them open to bringing this topic to our congregations as a priority of urgency?
That is a phenomenal question. And I would say with the Lenten series, we have a lot of pastors and church leaders who are in it. And it's incredible work in the way that a lot of these pastors are in locations where congregation members are making the bombs, or where the wall is going up in between, Mexico, by the same Israeli company that built the wall in Israel, Palestine. And so I would suggest that that's a great way for pastors, and it's not too late, can connect and share in conversation. I would also say have them reach out to our team at Sumud for conversation. And that is what Sumud is going to be, is a resource for people to be able to have the hard conversations and have resources that they can supply to their congregations and to their people that can meet them where they're at. And so that's how I would answer that. Is there anybody else on the team that wants to answer that as well?
I don't know. I would oftentimes rely on my colleagues to share the kind of the insight into engaging pastors into this work. But one of the things that I'll say, having in the beginning of my career worked on anti-genocide mobilization, and I will say regret is such a powerful emotion. And the way that regret stays with you for a lifetime. And I say this because my career in anti-genocide work started working with people who had such weight of profound regret around not stopping the genocide in Rwanda. If you've ever had the chance to read Romeo Dallaire's Shake Hands with the Devil, I mean, I've met him, I've spoken with him many times, and regret is such a clear and heavy emotion. And I think as pastors, as leaders of congregations, the ability to help people so they don't carry that. They don't wonder, I didn't know all the facts, I didn't feel comfortable. I think helping people avoid the weight of that, their life, is part of pastoral work. And maybe, and speaking from a place of vulnerability as a congregant and saying, I don't want to regret not saying something. So that would be the thing that stands out to me.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Susannah. Back to you, Jenny.
Yes, absolutely.
Jenny, can I
Reverend,
add a quick
yeah.
side note here? In terms of things that people can do in the coming months, and especially when the airlines start to come back to the region, is for people to come and visit. I can't tell you how important for our church members to come and to be part of, to come and see, to speak to the pastors here at the ELCGHL, to speak to the bishop, to go and see the schools. You will think, absolutely, it's good to come. It's good to be on a spiritual journey, but part of that spiritual journey is really to be with the people. So if you are thinking about it, please don't hesitate to reach out. I know that Pastor Munther would love to see you. I know that the bishop would love to see you. I know that um, the Christian community here and the Palestinian people have hope when they see people from around the world come to speak to them and to listen to them. So this is a calling on behalf of our Palestinian siblings, for all of you and for our church and our siblings in Christ everywhere, to come and to hear the story of the Palestinian people on the ground. And we are always available to all of you for any questions. So please come and see, please. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And as Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac was saying, I mean, yes, money, but spiritual support. I mean, being there, showing up, and regret is something that we all can carry, not just pastors. So speak up, stand up, get out there, and let's support each other as we continue to stand up against this humanitarian and moral catastrophe that is happening. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being here. I want to remind you of the Lenten series that's happening. You can see it on our Instagram, Facebook, and webpage. You can see all the videos, download them, share them with your pastors, congregation members, friends. Also want to remind you that this is just part one of a 3-part series for webinars. So make sure to mark your calendars for March 6th at 10 a.m. and Saturday, April 13th at 10 a.m. so we can continue the conversation. I want to remind you that we do have our social media platforms, and TikTok will be coming down the road. And we also want to remind you of the resources that Susannah gave in the chat as well. Talk to your policy members, talk and write letters to the editors of local papers. You have the power to make a bigger difference than you know. And also, we're just grateful that you're here and that you continue to show up. So keep showing up. Thank you for being here. The recordings, again, will be available to come Tuesday on our webpage and our social media platforms. And we are so grateful for the ways that you continue to show up. Reverend Amy Ruman, would you mind praying us out?
I will not mind that. So friends, let us close the moment of prayer. The Lord be with you. Oh God, we do walk through the valley of the shadow of death. We are aware of how deep and how long it is, with no end, no clear end in sight. So we pray today alongside our siblings in Gaza, in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem, in the region, for all who are in harm's way, for those who live in fear or terror of the next bomb or raid or act of violence, of the shadow of genocide over the region. We prayed for those who walk through the valley of hunger and famine, for those who wait for aid trucks that do not arrive. We pray as we walk with siblings whose rights have been violated, whose dignity has been denied, for children who live in uncertainty and seek consolation. For all these things, we lift this up to you from the valley, and we ask God for your promise to be with us here, to be clear and forceful and apparent to us. So we cling to your promise that your cross, your resurrection, your Easter hope, your Pentecost spirit wait for us here in the valley too. And so we cling to the promise of your Sumud, for your faithfulness and promise to be with us. That will increase our own Sumud, our own resilience, our own fortitude, and those of our Palestinian siblings in the occupied territories in the region, that your goodness and mercy will follow them in these days. And we pray that your Sumud will also enlighten, inform, and bring your urgency here in the United States, that we may not weary in speaking boldly and urgently and unceasingly to all who will hear among our elected leaders and in the administration. We pray that amidst this horror, that you keep us connected, that you keep us unsettled, that you keep us faithful, and that you keep us close as we walk the way of this valley, but that we walk it with Jesus and towards justice. And we ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Amy, for that powerful prayer. In hope and Sumud, we send out to you, send you out in peace. Thank you for joining, everyone.